We're joined now by Christine Lagarde, former head of the IMF, now the president of the European Central Bank. Good morning.
Good morning,
have
Margaret.
you here.
Lovely to be back.
And your recovery's going all right?
Yes, in a couple of days I think I'll be fine.
I'm glad to hear that. You have a long list of things ahead of you, and I want to ask you about the global recovery. You were speaking a few days ago, and you said the recovery for the economy is fragile and uncertain. In this country, the Fed thinks we'll see a mild recession later this year. What is it that you predict?
First of all, there is recovery. That's, I think, a point that was not really firm only 6 months ago, where we all assumed that there would be a recession, if only a technical one. If you look at all the forecasts at the moment, it's all positive. It's been slightly downgraded, but overall we have a recovery, and we are faced with high uncertainty because of multiple factors. You know, from our corners of the world, it's the war in Ukraine, it's the financial stability that clearly has been shaken up a bit by the US and Switzerland development. It's inflation that we are fighting. It's all that which really create a halo of uncertainty around a recovery that we want to embed. That's pretty much where we are.
So there were those recent bank failures here in the United States, also one in Switzerland. Given that, it sounds like you're saying you don't see a hard landing. You're seeing a positive trajectory for the global economy.
I think we have a narrow path to navigate, which requires that both the governments and the central banks around the world adopt the right policies.
Given the bank failures we just saw, you hear from bank CEOs in this country this idea that they're getting more cautious about lending money, largely, that there's some contraction in credit there. How concerned are you, and how does that complicate your planning?
It's funny you should ask complication, because in a way it facilitates my planning. And it complicates the future as far as growth.
Because it slows down business activity,
yes.
So you don't have to raise rates as much or as frequently.
We don't have to reduce. We'll see, because we need to really measure what will come out of these financial events that took place recently. What impact will it have? How will banks react? How will they assess risk, and how much credit will they lend? But if they don't lend too much credit, and if they manage their risk, it might reduce the work that we have to do to reduce inflation. Okay? But if they reduce too much credit, then it will weigh on growth excessively.
There are predictions that the U.S. could default in its national debt as soon as June, some say September. And we have a political standoff in this country, virtually no negotiation happening on how to resolve this. Does that undermine your confidence in the United States? And what message does that send to the world?
I have huge confidence in the United States. You know, ever since my year in this country, in this city, in 73, 74, I have had confidence in this country. And I just cannot believe that they would let such a major disaster happen of the United States defaulting on its debt. This is not possible. I cannot believe that it would happen. But if it did happen, it would have very, very negative impact, not just for this country, where confidence would be challenged, but around the world. Let's face it. This is the largest economy. It's a major leader in economic growth around the world. It cannot let that happen. I understand the politics. I've been in politics myself. But there is a time when the higher interest of a nation has to prevail. I'm sorry.
And you think that will happen? The higher
I
interest?
have huge trust in this country, yet again.
You're bringing a lot of optimism to a show where we don't have a lot of optimism, Madame Lagarde. No, I like it. It's interesting. It's a change. I want to ask you, though, about what you just said in terms of U.S. leadership. You look to the other side of the globe, and Xi Jinping has said he wants China to be the world's leading power by 2049. And Beijing is very interlinked into so many economies, particularly in Europe. Is the U.S. losing global influence?
There is clearly a competition between these large economies. What I hope very much is that they can have a dialogue, because, you know, all these relationships, whether it's trade, whether it's politics, whether it's economic development, whether it is financial stability, it's a two-way street. We cannot ignore each other, and trade should not be confrontational. It has to be careful. It has to identify the areas that are strategic for one country or the other, or all the others, but it shouldn't be confrontational. I'm on the same page as Henry Kissinger on that, or Kevin Rudd, the new Australian ambassador. Conflict is not unavoidable.
But there is, it seems, increased political pressure to choose between the United States and China in many ways, in some of these political capitals. Is that even practical from an economic point of view?
It would lead to economic downside. The amount of which is uncertain. Is the global economy going to be affected by 1 or X%? There are multiple forecasts. All of them are negative. So the decoupling and the sort of bipolarization of the world would lead to less economic growth, less prosperity in the world, more poverty across the world. So I think that this is something that should be by all means avoided.
Madame Lagarde, it's always wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.